repeat the nonconformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Welcome back to Positive Blatherings. It's been a little bit of a hiatus, but, that's what happens when you have to work on things. I've been working on me lately, and it's important that everybody does that. I know I've met a couple of people who just recently who said, oh, you shouldn't go to therapy or they were talking about therapy being a bad thing because it means you're broken, and I can't tell you how much I disagree with that. People, even if you think that there's nothing wrong in your life, go to therapy. It's like going to the doctor, check up your body. You do the same thing with your mind and your emotions, I believe. Today's guest is very special to me because, of course, as you know, I'm sober 3 years and change. And anytime I can speak to someone who's been down that road and who has devoted their lives to helping those of us with addiction issues, they have a special place in my heart. So without further ado, I want to welcome Bobby Newman. He's an addiction interventionist, certified drug prevention professional, and substance abuse counselor, and has an incredible story. Bobby, where are you joining us from? Out west?
Currently, I'm in Kansas City.
Oh, you're in Kansas City. Okay, cool.
Yep.
It's a nice town. I've been there.
I like it.
I've been there a couple of times. Are you from Kansas City?
No, I'm originally from Oklahoma.
So
Yep.
the part that really got me in reading your bio was that you were essentially facing prison and have managed to turn your life around, and more so have turned your life around and dedicated your life to helping others with addiction and their families. So I just love to hear your story. It sounds amazing.
Well, I thank you for that. It's funny. I always, actually, in looking at it, I always, it's was just short of the police chasing me down the street with the lights on.
Wow.
That's how close it came to me actually going to jail for a very long time. I was smart enough to negotiate a 7-year prison sentence and about $300,000 in fines down to 2 weeks and $2,500 without an attorney. But then I was stupid enough to keep violating my probation and until I got to the point of I was literally this close to going. And fortunately, I had a great PO and a great, the court was willing to work with me since I checked myself into rehab. They said, well, as long as you stay there, we'll leave you alone.
So you without an attorney, you negotiated that sentence down to practically nothing?
Yeah. And I'd been to jail enough to know how to kind of work the system. And, I had talked to a guy, I think it was when I was in the holding cell, when I was arrested, he kind of, he gave me like a couple of pointers on, and then I got the paperwork to show up for court. And then I was talking to people. And so I was kind of, and then I had, based on my previous experience, I kind of knew what they wanted. I knew what I was facing. I knew what was in favor of the court. I saved them a lot of trouble by just walking in and making a plea deal right off the bat. And they asked me how I wanted to plead. And I said, I don't know. I don't know how I want to plead, but I do know there's a video of me committing the crime. And the judge, he kind of laughed too. He goes, oh, okay. And so I said, so I was able to walk out to the prosecutor. This was in a federal courthouse. I was able to walk out into the hallway and, just negotiate a deal because I knew that, they were looking at 3 or 4 court dates at least to have to prepare for court, have to come back and, have this on the docket and things. So I was able to get it off the docket and get it done. So they were like, okay, we'll cut this guy a lot of slack because, he's willing to work with us. And I knew that going in. And so, but at the same time, in your mind, you say, oh, I'm ready to do this. I'll straighten up. I'll stop doing drugs. I'll do all the right things. And that's what you tell yourself until it doesn't happen. And then you end up where I was at. So,
yeah. And it's that you always say it's that that thing that we used to do. You wake up and you have a bad hangover. You're like, I am never drinking again. I'm never going to do this again. I've learned my lesson. But the disease goes, no. Let's keep doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Then something happened. Yeah, exactly. It's not a true decision. So
what was that turning point that really made it all click? What happened?
Well, I was in a program, and I was in a long-term program because I had about 4 months left of my probation. And so I decided to stay put in a program that was co-ed. It was almost like going back to college. I mean, without the booze and the partying. So, and the girl, the promiscuous activity.
Right.
So, I enjoyed being there. It was a nice environment, and people were there trying to help. But the turning point for me was when I was able to handle, there's basically 3 barriers that I've discovered for a lot of folks that are, once you overcome these barriers, you have a greater chance of success. And, those would be cravings, depression, and then guilt. And I'd gotten through the cravings for the drugs and alcohol, and the depression, I'd got through that part. And then the guilt was the biggest barrier for me. And so once I was able to overcome that hurdle and relieve myself of the wrongdoings and the guilt that I felt for what I had done, I experienced so much relief that I knew I'd turn a corner at that point.
Wow. That's an interesting idea, because I never thought of it that way, that the guilt is huge. I mean, it's what really brings people back in that revolving, self-destructive behavior, when you're so guilty about what you've done that you almost kind of resign yourself to say, well, whatever, I've already hurt these people. So
yeah, for me, I just couldn't face it. I was like bumping up against it, and it came to the forefront when the effects of the drugs and alcohol wore off. I was able to, then I was like, this stuff came just glaring at me right in the face. And I'm like, man, I just felt like such a terrible person. And I just felt lower, just very low. And I remember going to my counselor and telling him, I'm like, man, I used to brag about this stuff. I remember when I first walked into the program, I was like kind of bragging about the stuff I'd done. And then now I'm looking at it going, man, I was a bad person. And he looked at me and he said, well, you should feel bad. He said, that's pretty bad stuff. And I didn't expect him to say that. I expected him to be a little bit more comforting, but no, he was like, no, you should feel bad. Matter of fact, if you didn't feel bad about that stuff that you've done, I would think there was something wrong with you.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, the question is, what are you going to do about it? And that's when then you take responsibility and you're able to unload that burden. And I experienced, that's again, when I experienced that relief, I was like, man, I could move on. So,
and what was
a lot of people, but I almost left the program at that point because I started bumping up against that stuff. And they had told me, if you leave, you're going to be a warrant for you, so, but I still that was still less threatening to me than confronting my inner demons. So,
and how did those around you take this journey?
People in the program?
No, like your family and friends and people close to you in your life.
They really didn't know about it at that point. As far as what I was going through at that time, that was something they just knew that I was changing. They just knew when they would come and visit me or whatever that, I'd made some big differences, and they would make comments. So, man, I could see some changes. And it wasn't they were very positive comments and things that I didn't really notice. I just knew internally I was going through experiencing relief physically and mentally. And so, they didn't really know what I was, that. The matter of fact, when I got through the program and I was kind of telling them some of the stuff that was going on, that they knew something was happening, but they didn't know all the details, all the dirty details. And I started giving them dirty details, and they were like, "Can you stop telling us things?" They didn't want to know anymore. So,
little too graphic.
Yeah. They're like, we don't want to know that.
So what was your mindset at this point, as far as setting goals and what were your goals then? Was it as simple as stay clean, stay sober?
my yeah, it was definitely trying to, the theme of it is that I was trying to put myself in a positive environment around positive people.
Right.
I wanted to help as many people as I could, as far as the things that I had learned going through a program. I didn't have any idea about it. And I was considered myself a reasonably intelligent person. Obviously I was doing very stupid things, but that was the other barrier that was preventing me from getting help too, is because I really didn't feel like there was somebody out there that could help me. I thought they didn't have reality of what I was going through. And the people that I had talked to, they unfortunately did not exude confidence for me to have confidence. But anyway, to get to the, point of is I started, my goal was I wanted to talk to as many kids as I could about what I'd learned. And they were starting up a drug prevention program at the time. And number one, I had zero public speaking experience. But I wanted to do, my oldest son was 8 years old at the time. So I thought if I could go out and talk to kids about drugs, and then I could learn how to public speak, because that was a goal. It was and I think public speaking, at least at that time, was the second most feared thing to do. Yeah. The first one would be skydiving.
Right. And they're pretty much on par, because for both of them, my hands start to sweat and I start to get, yeah.
So I wanted to learn I wanted to confront that. And then I wanted to go out and get the message out to, I'm from a small town in southern Oklahoma. So I was able to go out and, do drug prevention and drug education programs in my area we actually reached over 600,000 kids.
Wow.
In a 10-year period before it was all said and done. But that was one of my goals, that I could kind of make up the damage that I'd created out there.
And did you walk me through like your process at that time for your day-to-day process? What methods were you using to stay sober and to keep yourself on task?
Well, one thing that I realized as I was going through the program is that nothing ever stays the same. It's either continually getting better, or it's going to gradually start getting worse, and then eventually take a deep dive. And so, and I look back at those times, and I was always working on doing things that was going to improve myself. And, that was by design. Part of the program that I went to, it taught you that you need to continue to improve. You got to continue to put one foot in front of the other, and whether it be for your physical self, whether it be your spiritual self, whether it be your family, your friends, you've got to really continually, improve things. So that was the fundamental thing that kept me moving forward. And I see a lot of people that would come out of these programs, and they would be very dynamic, very capable, very capable people, but they would kind of take off and they would take off real fast. And then eventually they would fall flat. And I never could figure out why that was, because I thought, man, these guys are going to do great out there. They've got all this potential. And then they would end up, and I see myself making steady positive gains. It's been 21 years now. And I now consider myself a low-flying bomber that was just clearing the treetops to now I've got some elevation, because I'm continuing to. And you go back and even look at I got married 16 years ago. It'll be 16 years in November, but I got married, and even that we were married 5 or 6 years, and we kind of got into a little bit of a stale relationship, and wasn't sure if we were going to stay together or not. We went to counseling. We each went to counseling, then we came together, did counseling together. And, that was another realization that I had about that, is that a marriage is a constant you're constantly creating on it, constantly improving, constantly. And that's the same thing. You have to do that in all areas of your life.
So what would you say was the reason why these people that when they came out of the program were really, headed upwards for great things and then just kind of fell out?
I think this is my personal opinion. Now, I don't have facts, but my opinion is that they lost sight of the fundamentals. They started like, if you compare it to basketball, they got too worried about how they were going to dunk the ball and forgot how they were going to dribble. And the fundamental thing about that is who do you have in your immediate surroundings? Who are you hanging out with? Who are you? You know what I mean? I mean, it's and a number of other things. I mean, and I see a lot of successful business people that they'll talk about, it's okay to want to make $1 million or $10 million or whatever. That's great. But the fundamental steps along the way to get there, you have to consistently do them every day. And you have to take those wins every day. If it's the fundamental, there's certain things that I do every day. And they may seem insignificant, but those are the little building blocks and the foundation that paves the way for you to reach those higher goals.
What are some of these things that you do every day?
Well, I try to, I take my vitamins. I try to keep an eye on what I'm eating. I get a certain amount of sleep. I try to improve, do something that's going to improve, my overall knowingness about life, whether it be, and I have to do things along the way to keep my counselor certifications and things like that. So I'm doing that all the time. I'm always trying to, at least spend some time with my family. I try to consistently exercise, those type of things. And so I'm actually on a training program right now for a physical training program, as well as a diet and things like that. So I'm doing those things that have to be done consistently as well. So.
And that's something that's really difficult for a lot of people to do, to get themselves disciplined enough for a daily sort of checklist of things that they have to do. But it's such an important first step in achieving your goals, is to, all right, and you keeping it simple, be healthy, get enough sleep, do things that I enjoy, like spending time with my family and things like that, so that my mental health is healthy, my body is healthy, and then therefore you have what it takes to kind of go forward.
That's right. It's those fundamental things, the areas of your life are interdependent on each other. And people sometimes don't realize that, if I spend all my time working and I don't take care of myself, eventually I'm not going to be able to work because I haven't taken care of myself. Or, if I don't if I'm spending all my time working and I don't pay attention to my family, or spend time with my family, eventually that's going to pull back and cause problems, which will also prevent me from being able to work. You see what I'm saying? So you have to keep a proper balance, and I, especially the last couple of years. I mean, we've had all these things that have happened that has pulled us away from things that would cause us to grow spiritually and enlighten ourselves spiritually, and fundamentally. I mean, churches being closed and AA groups being closed, things like that. I mean, those type of things. So, I went to my first. Little, they had here in Kansas City, they had one of the recovery coalitions had a seminar, and I have to go get continuing education hours too, but it's a lot of fun to go there because you see a lot of other people that are like-minded people in your community that are doing the same things. You get to meet people, and I hadn't really got a chance to do that in Kansas City because I've only been here for a couple of years and COVID's been so I haven't really got to know people in my local area personally. I've met them on Zoom and things, but which is a big deal. And so it was a really, really cool. That was last Friday, so it was really cool for me to be able to go and do that and just be around other people that are positive and that are really applying the fundamental things that to move their life forward and improve their life.
The being around positive people, you are the company you keep. That is something that I 100% believe in. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I started doing this podcast back in 2018 or something, was because I wanted to talk to, learn from, and just constantly be, communicating with positive people doing positive things, achieving goals, successful things. And so getting to talk to someone like yourself is key for me to continue with what I'm trying to do, is because you're reminding me things, because I'm kind of personally right now, I was actually saying, man, I've got to do a podcast about positivity, and I'm not real positive today. You know, my wife has some health issues she's going through. I've got some stuff I'm going through, and it's just like, and you know how everything comes at once, and it's like, oh my gosh, you know. But this is, speaking to you, has kind of reminded me, like, yeah, this is, you got to talk to guys like this. You got to talk to people and think about what they do and apply those things to what you do. So,
you know, that's 100% correct. And I get that a lot in talking to folks. I mean, even people that I'm trying to help, families or even addicts, and I'll learn things from them. But, you know, and back to the fundamental things that, you know, do every day. I have a list of things that I recite on my refrigerator to myself, and my wife and I put them on the refrigerator. We recite, you know, I can and do create positive effects. I am a good person. I am, you know, and because that's who you are, regardless of the day. You may not feel like it, but if you can go in there and look at that and go, oh, you know what? That's who I am. And then you not only expect that of your friends, right? But you also then become that person, because, you know, and then you're more likely to either A, cause them to change their ways, or B, you know, maybe you reconsider who your friends are, and maybe you have to weed some of them out.
Right.
And I even like high school friends that I've known since grade school, and I could go back to those grade school days, or, you know, even grade school and high school, but it's like I can go back to those days and remember, oh yeah, when we were playing ball, we played that team and we did this and it was a great time, everybody. But nowadays it's not the same, because that person is either taking a different path, has a different outlook. You constantly have to look at that, protect yourself. My grandmother used to tell me all the time, you are who you run with.
Yep.
And I was like, you know, and the older I get, the wiser that lady, I realized that lady was. And it's true.
That's so funny, because that's how it works. And that idea that youth is wasted on the young, but it's true. As we get older, we start recognizing the wisdom that we heard, that we kind of brushed off when we were younger. And you're like, oh, why didn't I listen? I should have listened. Well, better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Why did I not listen? And I used to tell my son, who's now my oldest, who's 30. I have an 11-year-old too, but I said, one of these days, you know, you're going to think that I'm goofy right now, and you're going to think I don't have any sense. But one of these days, you're going to remember me telling you this, and you're going to think, remember, you know. And he's called me back 4 or 5 times throughout, you know, the last few years, going, Dad, you remember that time you told me? Yeah, I do, because I just tell him, I don't expect you to believe me right now,
right? Because
I didn't believe it either until later. But you know, there's going to be a time you're going to go, aha, oh yeah, Dad told me. But and so it's so funny, but it's constantly, I've had to, you know, it seems hardcore, but I have a certain set of standards, and I'm not perfect by any means. I don't pretend that I am, you know, but if somebody comes to me and says, hey, you know what, you said something or did something I didn't particularly like, and I appreciate it if you didn't do that anymore, I would probably say, okay, I got you. You know, and I wouldn't do it anymore. Yeah. More importantly, I wouldn't do it anymore. Yeah. But but you know, because if I did, I'd expect the person to not want to have a relationship with me, and so that's where, you know, I've my policy on that is, from a personal point, is I have a point of intolerance, because anytime that some of those things have been violated, I've ended up paying the price later, or fallen victim to doing the same thing that person did that wasn't okay. Mm-hmm. Not falling victim to it, or I would, that's not the right term. It's basically making the mistake of doing the same thing and basically dropping down to their level.
Right.
And I shouldn't have done that, you know. So either A, I'm doing things already that's causing me to be around that person, or you know, I'm now going to go into agreement with that and start acting that way myself. And so either one of those was not good. So, you know, and that even goes to where somebody, if you know, you have friends around you that are talking negatively about other friends, what do you think they're doing when they're not talking to you?
Oh yeah. Oh, I know that. The funny thing or the interesting thing is that was one of the first. That was one of the first changes that I made when I started making changes and trying to, hang around with better people, I guess, for more positive people. Is I cut the gossipers out. I cut all the gossipers out, or at least first I said, I made it known that, hey, I'm not really interested in gossip anymore. I don't really want to know. And the ones that kind of were able to take a step back and say, hey, you know what? That's right. That's kind of crappy. Let's stop doing that.
Yeah.
They were still my friends, but the other ones that just kept doing it, I'm like, no, I can't. It's just that cloud of negativity that you hang around, and it follows you everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wins on that one. I always have to catch myself too. I mean, it's like I said, I'm definitely don't make the mistake of thinking I'm perfect, but if you're self-corrective, it's kind of like when that counselor told me, if you didn't feel bad about those things that you did, then I would think something wrong with you. But so, yeah, we all make mistakes, but we're always on a path of self-improvement. And with that comes your friends, and that also comes with not being afraid to ask for help too. I mean, I realized that I can't go to the gym, and I could go to 24-hour fitness, which I really like a lot of the machines there, but I'm not going to get the same workout when I go to the gym and I work out I have to have somebody literally run me to make me work. And you need that kind of people around you. And if you'll find you probably realize this, a lot of successful trainers and mentors and coaches have coaches and mentors themselves.
Right.
So it's okay to ask for help. And somebody, it's like me, I'm like, I can't, I'm wasting my time out here. I'm wasting my time. And and I go in there and I've got a guy now who's, professional boxer, and he's a trainer. And I mean, I like him a lot too. I mean, his personality, we have a very similar personality, but he doesn't cut me any slack, which is what I need. I need somebody that's not going to cut me any slack.
I had not a coach or a trainer, but I had a therapist who pretty much said, I'm not going to let you get away with this stuff. I'm going to call you out on your bullshit. Basically what she told me. And I loved it. It was great. Cause it was like, I don't need someone to tell me what I want to hear. I need someone to tell me what I need to hear.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
So when you went from working with kids, working with, you say over 300,000 or 600,000 kids that you ended up working with in your community.
Well, our program that we set up, it reached that many, and I personally didn't do that many. I personally have been in front of about 135,000 or so kids, but I helped set up two different programs, one in Oklahoma and one in Hawaii. And we had other presenters that took, the reins to present to kids. Matter of fact, I had three presenters under me at one point at the program in Oklahoma, and we ended up going ahead and getting this program. It was a curriculum that was developed by another guy that was a friend of mine, but it was enabled to be streamlined into it was approved by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services as an evidence-based program. So, and we actually got kids to not only change their thoughts about drugs, we got them to change their behavior about drugs. So, which is really unheard of in a drug prevention program. We basically would teach them how a person becomes addicted. We didn't go and teach them, well, this is what this is, and this is how people use it, which I guess could be effective, not to knock any, but we taught, people would argue, well, just because I smoke marijuana doesn't mean I'm going to get addicted to it. I said, well, you're right. We'd always say, okay, yeah, you're right. But we can tell you that there is a certain percentage of them that are going to get addicted of kids. And here's why. And then we'd explain the physical aspects in a manner in which they could understand it. And it would always resonate with them. And then we talk about, how to stay away from drugs, setting goals and having barriers to those goals. I mean, and explain, why, if you reach a goal, if you're playing a football game and I hand you the ball and you run a touchdown the first time and come back, high fives, everybody, oh, that's great. Then you hand you the ball again, and you run another touchdown. Well, then after about the fourth time, you're going to go, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of running touchdowns. But if I were to hand you the ball and you get tackled after about 10 yards, and then we come back and do it again, and then you get knocked back 5 yards, and then then you make 20 yards, and you've got barriers that are preventing you from reaching that goal, and then you make the goal. Now it's worth something,
right?
You see, so anyway, and
interesting.
Kids I get it. So kids will take a drug to solve a problem, maybe they've got issues at home, or they're bored, or they're lonely, or they're whatever, and then that drug will solve the problem temporarily, and so it achieves the goal of what they're looking for, but they don't necessarily. It also brings in other problems as well. So,
I saw, and I know that just because it's on the internet does not necessarily mean it's true, yeah. But right. I saw a thing that was going around on the internet, and it was about a study that they did with rats, and they put cocaine in the rats' water, and basically the idea was that when the rats that were taking the cocaine, when they didn't have anything to do, they would take the cocaine. But then they had rats that were in a much better environment with all kinds of things to do, and those rats chose not to take the cocaine. I'm really butchering what they did.
No. I recently read that too. I've seen it before.
It's about environment. Yeah. It's about like the environment that you're in, right, and how a certain environment could make you more susceptible to addiction, rather than if you're in an environment where you are busy and you have goals and you have things to achieve, that you're less likely to go down that path.
Well, that's the analogy too, and you're actually spot on, because if you take a kid that's swimming around, and I actually saw a little clip, a little meme on Facebook from Andy Griffith's show years ago. It was a show back in the 50s, but talking about a kid that'll, if he doesn't have a goal, doesn't have an interest, he's something shiny comes along and he's going to grab onto it.
Right.
But if he's got interests and he's got goals and he's got a plan, he's less likely to want to go towards that shiny object. And so it falls right in line with that. And that's the true statement for us. And if you've got time to sit around and think about all the negative things in your life, and people have things, they have barriers and problems that come up, but the truth is that you might have too much time on your hands.
Yeah. What's that? Yeah. What's the old adage? It's the devil's playground. Like it. I don't know. I don't remember. Do you know what I'm talking about? Idle hands are the devil's playground, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it is. Things will enter in, and so you have to kind of create those things, even if it's small things. Like for me, I mean, and I consider these to be successful. Even when my wife recently tested positive for COVID, so we're she's like coming through the symptoms now.
Good.
Yeah, so she's fine now, and she's got a test again in a couple of days. She'll probably get a negative test, but we're hunkered down at home. But I'm still like, okay, what can I do to keep moving things forward here? I'm limited on where I can go and what I can do, but what can I do? What can I do from home? At least do something that's positive,
So speaking of COVID, how did the pandemic affect what you do, your business and your profession? I know that it affected a lot of people, especially around mental health, and I know the stats were crazy. A lot of people were day drinking and just like, now we can drink, and caused a lot of problems.
Well, yeah, no, in the stats, it's obviously gotten much worse. I mean, there's more overdose deaths than there ever has been. It's the number one leading cause of accidental death in the United States right now, primarily from fentanyl. And, there was a little bit of an ebb and flow when we first got, this thing first hit, I had rehab centers that when the supply chain of the drugs that are coming into the country was shut off, a lot of addicts were going into treatment because they couldn't get access to their drugs. They thought, well, I don't want to be sick out here. I'm going to go in someplace. And so there was a little bit, like a few weeks of like everything kind of froze, and then an influx of people started coming in. But then I remember in 2020, I was as busy as I've ever been. And then 2021, the same thing. And this year it's been pretty stagnant because I've had a couple of the treatment centers that refer to me for interventions have gone out of business. So, so that was a big, and I haven't really gone out and tried to, I mean, I have to a degree. I mean, I obviously podcast and advertise out there. I've got my name out there, but the treatment industry is a very competitive market, and it's very hard to have a presence on the internet without spending a lot of money that I don't quite frankly have. So
yeah.
So
anyway. So your business, can you tell me a little bit about Newman Interventions and how long you've been doing it and what you guys
I've been
do?
helping people get off drugs since, I always tell people, look, I've been dealing with addicts for 40 years and 21 of it's been sober. But I've been, through prevention, and then I actually worked in a treatment program for about 16 years. I ran an outpatient program. I've worked in one of the largest inpatient programs in the country. I did discharge planning. I did admissions. I did, and so I've been involved with rehab from start to finish. And then when I was out in Hawaii, I would have treatment centers on the mainland call me to say, hey, we've got a family. We need you to come go do an intervention. And I'd worked with other interventionists so I've been involved with interventions for 20 years, but, actually been doing them personally for the last probably 10 or 12. Occasionally I've done it more than my first intervention was in 2002, but, I've been in my own business since 2017, the beginning of 2017. And matter of fact, I was going to go into a different line of work, and the treatment center I used to work for said, hey, we need to go to North Dakota and get this guy. And so I went up there and I did about 3 interventions in a row, and they were all successful. And they said, well, you got to get back in the game. So I thought, well, I'll start this business up. And I continually learn things about what it takes to be successful with an intervention. What are the components? What it takes to, and just taking a look and saying, why does this intervention work and why did this one not work? Because they were completely opposite going into it. I would think the one that it was successful was not going to work based on the elements, and the one that wasn't successful was going to be because of the elements. And so I had to go back and look at what's the differences there. And I've been able to define the fundamental things that are make an intervention successful. So a lot of people that call me, my son's on drugs, my daughter's on drugs, I need help. And so we help them find a treatment program, and then we'll help them through the intervention process. And then we not only help them throughout as their loved one is in treatment, but also, coming out on the other end, kind of setting goals. Now, we're very limited on, we like to develop relationships with our people that come to us for help. We want to know them. We want to be able to contact them 3 years from now and go, hey, how's it going? Oh, he's still doing well. And the majority of our clients, that's what we're fortunately able to see. I mean, it's a very high success rate for a reason, but that's basically the business. So you asked me that question, I gave you a long answer.
And now interventions, how have they changed over, say, the last 20 years or so? Because you say intervention to me, and I think of, the person comes home and everybody's sitting in the living room and they all have their letters that they wrote to the person, and they do that. Is that pretty much how it works these days as well?
That's a Johnson style intervention, and that's the majority of the interventions that are done. I mean, unfortunately, the addict will always say, oh, you should have done it differently. But the truth is if a different way would work, then we would do it differently. I mean,
right.
Sometimes, this has gone on. Well, most of the time when they get to me, it's been going on for years. often 10 or 12 years or more. And, there's a lot of emotions involved and very frustrating. So you put a well thought out plan together to cover all the aspects of what could possibly happen when you talk to this person about, what's going on. And, if I can get the family all on the same page, and then we can get in front of the addict, regardless of whatever means, and we can communicate to him how we feel and do it in a very effective manner, we have about an 85 to 90% chance he's going to go to treatment. Now, if he is so addicted that the drugs are making every decision, and, I give examples of, I've got a 28-year-old girl, from the East Coast that has a 7-year-old daughter that, she wants to go live with her boyfriend and do drugs and leave her 7-year-old daughter at home, and her daughter's actually begging her to be in her life. She doesn't really know what's going on with her mom, but she says, Mom, I really wish that, you were in my life. Now, she wasn't necessarily part of the intervention. I'd been up there for a few days, and then her grandmother told her what I was doing there. Didn't tell her exactly she's here to help your mom. Well, if that 7-year-old girl can't motivate this woman to get off drugs and leave her drug using boyfriend to go be a part of her life, there's not a whole lot that, the only other thing that would probably keep her to get help is jail, unfortunately, because, most people are miserable with their life when they're on drugs. They want to change it. They don't know how. Sometimes they won't even admit they have a drug problem, but they definitely will agree that their life sucks.
Yep.
And then, they want that relationship with their family. There's somebody, there's some sort of change, even though a lot of times the family may not be perfect and they've made mistakes, and the people will, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And it could be true. I always tell the person, look, there's two sides to every story. There's two. I'm not going to sit there and tell you, because I know there's something negative going on in your life, because you wouldn't be doing this if it were great, but your solution to handling your problem is what the problem is. Not saying you don't have a legitimate gripe, but your solution is like, my wife makes me mad, so I'm going to go to the bar and get drunk. Now, is that going to make her happy?
No. Right.
Might as well get some gas and throw it right on the fire. So, okay, so I'm going to drink myself. No, that's not a. I had one time a guy in Hawaii. He drove his problem was he couldn't stand people, but he had went out and got a car off his folks' car lot. They owned a used car lot over there where we were at, and he drove a car into a telephone pole on purpose.
Jeez.
I don't have a drug problem. Oh, okay. All right. Well, how's your life going? He said, it sucks. And I said, well, what sucks about it? He said, I hate people. I said, well, there's a lot of people I don't like either, but I can't drive my car into a telephone pole as a solution. I've got to figure out other way of dealing with it. And he asked me, well, how can you help me? And I started explaining to him ways that he could be helped through this particular program he was going to. And he became very interested at that point. And so
that's interesting, because hypothetical, do you think if you could go back in time and meet your younger self with what you know now, do you think you can convince your younger self to go into this program?
That's a great question. I really don't know, because my family sat down and asked me. I just got out of jail. I had to do my last remaining days in jail. They meet me outside the jail, my dad, my sister, and they'd both driven long ways to get there. My sister drove about 4 or 5 hours. My dad drove a couple hours to come over and meet me at this jail. And they said, well, we want to talk to you. And we're going to meet you over at this restaurant, this Mexican restaurant. And I said, I'm driving over there, and I'm thinking, well, what's a get out of jail family day all wrapped up into one? I mean, what's going on? And they set me down. We got the, food, and, so they broke out the brochure, and I said all the things that I hear now about, I know what I need to do. I don't need to go to rehab. I know what, blah, blah, blah. And I just was, no, I'm not going. And and I think about that moment right there. That was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done right there. And even though I'd done a lot of dumb things, that was really stupid, because the next 2 weeks I'm lucky to have lived through.
Right.
Not only lived, but didn't end up in prison, because I got arrested again. I had another car wreck, OD'd, and then I ended up crawling back and going, I think I'll take you up on that offer. But I don't know if they would have sat down and done a formal intervention at that point and basically told me, look, if we care about you, we love you, we want you to get help, but if you don't do, and you don't necessarily, I don't want people to get the wrong idea, because I never come out of the gate with this. It's after a considerable effort is put into it that you then would tell the person consequences. That considerable effort could be hours and even days before you would ever tell the person, look, I can't continue like this. I love you, I care about you, but your life is going down the tubes. I want to help you prevent that. But if you're not going to get help, then I've got to make a decision for my own sanity, which is the truth. It's kind of like I use the example. And if they would have told me that at that point, I don't know what I can't honestly say, because in my mind, I thought I had an out.
Yeah.
But I truthfully did not. I had no out. And I probably would have hopefully made the same decision that I fortunately was able to make at that time. But at least, it's kind of like the family everybody's in the boat and somebody jumps out. So everybody spends all their time trying to get the person back in the boat. Meanwhile, the boat's sailing for the rocks. So you have to look at like, okay, what's the greatest good for us as a family and ourselves?
Right.
We love you. We'll do anything for you, but I'm not going to continue to help you get bailed out of jail, have a car to drive so you get to work, or loan you money if you have to get an attorney, or, not going to continue to do those things. So I don't know. I would hopefully think that being able to just shake my head and go, it ain't gonna work out. It's not gonna work out like you think, man. This is gonna, I always tell people, these are things that I've picked up along the way. I mean, it's a long answer again, but I look at this and I'm like, tomorrow's not gonna go well for you. And they're gonna be like, a lot of times people will say, well, you don't know that. I'm like, well, it's not hard to figure out. And how can you say that? Because I can tell by what you're doing today, what your tomorrow is going to be like. If you're doing stupid things today, tomorrow's going to suck. The consequences of your stupid decisions are, if you're doing all the right things today, then tomorrow may be a little bit better. Right. But if you're number one, if you're not willing to change your environment and change the people that you're around on an immediate basis in a situation like this, the likelihood of you having success is zero. There is no other option. You have to get yourself out of the environment immediately and get around positive people immediately. It's just like a danger. You have to be like literally extracted out of the danger zone.
Yeah.
When it's like where I was at. So, and that's what I used to tell people, because I believed it, that I would never tell anybody that they couldn't do it on their own. The runway to do it on your own is like super long and it's super, super hard. But the truth is, I really don't even give yourself a chance, because fundamentally you're not doing the right thing. You're still around the same people in the same environment doing the same thing. It's just not, it never works. So
you do these all over the country, it says. You travel around?
I've been all over the country, been to Canada, Mexico, actually went to Europe, went to Ukraine a couple of years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So how do people get a hold of you? They just go to your website?
They can go to my website, newmaninterventions.com, and they can call me at 866-989-4499. I have people that answer my phone, but you can tell them that you saw them. I listened to them on this podcast, and they'll give you my information directly, or they'll take down some, basic information, and then we'll get you on the path. Now, if somebody's looking for a treatment program, we can help them with that too. Somebody says, "Hey, I think I want to make a change." I always tell folks when they go into programs, I said, "There's two things I can promise you. One is you're going to feel better than you have in who knows how long. And two is you're going to have a different outlook." on life. I can promise you those two things. The rest of it's going to be up to you, but what you're willing to put into. But I can do that if you'll do the program. If you'll go and commit yourself to at least doing the program and coming out on the other side, then those two things will happen. I can guarantee that.
Those are good promises. I wish that I had someone that told me those, that those things could happen. I had to find out and my, quote unquote rock bottom, to some compared to others may seem tame, but for me and for my family, it was pretty serious. So I wish someone at the time could have told me, but I'm happy with where I am now. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to, I guess, but it would have been nice.
I tell you can't compare it. Then that's the thing of it is the threshold for some people is, it's like driving down the road and you see a flashing sign that says warning, right? Some people are just going to keep going there because all they're thinking about is getting where they're going as fast as they can. Other people are going to look at that and go, hey, wait a minute, I need to pay attention. What's going on up here?
Yeah.
You have, and sometimes people have to see the number of those signs that you have to see before you actually pay attention is the degree. So, the threshold or the bottom is different for folks.
Yeah.
People, and sometimes when I'm talking to families is that, well, when I stopped using, I had an uncle that he was able to do this and do that. I'm like, well, we're not talking about your uncle. Great for your uncle. That's awesome. I'm really happy, but we're not talking about your uncle. We're talking about your son, and this is what it may, and, there's fundamental differences even with people that a lot of folks don't realize is like, you have people that are going into a very, they're able to go into an outpatient program and get some success out of it, or go into different lighter forms of treatment and have success. And that's great. But most of the folks that when they come time for an intervention, when I have to get involved, it's going to take a significant amount of rehabilitation to turn this person around, because it's usually been going on for years. And I don't want to, I don't want to give the person like false hope, and this is going to take some work. We got, this didn't happen overnight. It's not going to undo overnight. We got to be willing to put some work in. And so some folks are even afraid of overreacting. I'm overreacting, and I'm like, well, there's no way you could ever overreact with this. You can always underreact, right? Or not quite do enough. So, in your case, I think that I look at folks like you and I'm like a little bit jealous, to be honest. Because it took me going way down here.
Right. Right. I got off lucky.
And I'm like, I feel like good for you, so that's the way I look at it.
Well, I hope some people can take some inspiration from your story and what you managed to accomplish. And again, if anybody needs any help with addiction, I would recommend that you contact Bobby. And it's all about helping other people, which is something that Bobby has dedicated his life to doing. And I appreciate you taking the time to tell us about it and tell us your story.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the kind words.
Yes, sir.